Welcome to Law Simple and Pure. I'm your host Dr. Vaishali, and in today's lecture we are going to learn 7 important questions in the paper Interpretation of Statutes. In the last lecture, Interpretation 1, we learned 3 important questions in the subject. Today we are going to learn 7 more important questions which can be asked for long question or for a short note. Question number 4, Rules of Statutory Interpretation. Question number 5, Literal Rule of Interpretation. Question number 6, Golden Rule. Question number 7, Mischief Rule. Question number 8, Harmonious Construction or Harmonious Interpretation of Statute. Question number 9, it's about a maxim which can be again asked for a long question or a short note. It's nociter asoicis. And question number 10 is ejusdem generis. So question number 5, rules of statutory interpretation. You will begin with introduction. You will state that rules of statutory interpretation are basically provided by courts. There is no law providing for statutory interpretation or rules of statutory interpretation. In fact, these rules are developed and made by courts. So there are some rules used by judiciary to interpret the statute. To interpret the correct meaning of statute, some strategy is applied by judiciary. First is literal or grammatical rule, second is golden rule, third is mischief rule, and fourth is rule of harmonious construction. First rule is literal or grammatical rule. This rule is applied by judges first. It is also called as dictionary rule. Interpretation, as we all know, is all about finding out the purpose of the statute, the defect it intends to remove and the remedy it offers. So while interpreting that statute, first rule which is used by judges is literal rule. Understanding plain meaning or literal meaning or dictionary meaning or natural or ordinary meaning of the words. Words should be given its simple plain meaning without ambiguity. It is said that the words themselves best declare the intention of the lawgivers. Why lawgivers use these words? Because they wanted to use it. They intend to use it, and that's why it is the duty of a judiciary to give plain meaning to those words. If the meaning of the words in statute is completely clear and explicit, okay, then the effect shall be given to the provision of a statute regardless of its consequences. So if statute is plain and clear, then it should be given its ordinary meaning and no need of further interpretation is required. Literal rule is based on 3 important maxims. Number 1, absoluta sentienia expositor non indigent. It means plain words need no exposition. If statute is crystal clear, no further explanation is needed. Number 2, expressio unius est excuso ulterius. The express mention of one thing is the exclusion of another. If something is clearly provided, you do not have to go to some other meaning. Number 3, verbis legis non est recledum, which means from the words of law there should be no departure. So what is provided as law is law, and judiciary is not required to do further interpretation. In the words of Lord Deeplock, where the meaning of the statutory words is plain and unambiguous. It means it is clear and non-confusing. It is not then for the judges to invent fancied ambiguities as an excuse for failing to give effect to its plain meaning, because they consider the consequences for doing so would be inexpedient or even unjust. So if statute is clear, it should be clearly interpreted without any further scope for fancy interpretation. What are the advantages of literal rule? Literal rule brings certainty in interpretation. So this is the meaning of this word, just apply it. So it brings certainty. It understands intent of legislature simply and clearly. If these are the words used by legislature, this is the meaning of this. So it brings clarity. Principle of parliamentary supremacy is respected by this rule. In India, we follow parliamentary supremacy. And parliamentary supremacy means law made by parliament is supreme. So whatever is written by parliament is supreme, and judiciary is no required to interpret it further. So it respects principle of parliamentary supremacy, and again it respects separation of powers. As per the theory of separation of powers, judges are there to interpret the law and they are not there to change the law. So whatever is provided as law by the legislature is the law, and they are not required to go beyond that law which is provided by legislature on paper. So dictionary meaning is the true meaning according to this rule. Just remember one thing, every rule is criticized. Every rule of interpretation of statute is criticized. So while writing a short note or a long question, provide everything. What is the meaning? What is the scope of that rule? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages or criticism, and all the case laws. So what is a criticism? The meaning of words might change in different contexts or from time to time. As we know, time changes and law should be changing, or the meaning of the same words should be interpreted in the changing context. Second, some ambiguity might still arise while interpreting due to the use of words like or, and, all. These words sometimes can be interpreted differently. It limits and bounds the judicial potential. So if judiciary has just to literally interpret the law, what is the use of judicial activism, right? So it limits the scope of judiciary. Let us go through some interesting case laws on literal rule. A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. In A.K. Gopalan's case, the Supreme Court narrowed down the meaning and scope of personal liberty and held that the term personal liberty meant only freedom of the physical body, and that Article 19(1)(d) and Article 21 have to be treated separately. So over here, judiciary interpreted personal liberty narrowly. It means just physical liberty. So this is an example of application of literal rule. In J.P. Bansal versus State of Rajasthan, it was observed that the intention of legislature is primarily to be gathered from the language used, which means that attention should be paid to what has been said and also to what has not been said. Therefore, a construction which requires for its support, addition, substitution or removal of words in rejection of words as meaningless must be avoided. So in J.P. Bansal, it was clearly provided that whatever is written by legislature is the law and it should be followed like law and no need of further interpretation is required. Next case law on literal rule is Maqbool Hussain versus State of Bombay. In this case, Maqbool, an Indian citizen, upon returning from an international trip, brought some gold with him. According to the Sea Customs Act, no Indian citizen was allowed to bring any valuable such as gold, and hence his gold was confiscated. Confiscated means it was taken away from him. He was then prosecuted under the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1947. Maqbool contended that since the gold has already been confiscated and that was a trial, he cannot be prosecuted under FERA. FERA means Foreign Exchange Regulation, as it would amount to double jeopardy. Double jeopardy means you cannot be sued for a same offence twice. However, the Supreme Court held that confiscation of gold cannot be termed as prosecution, and hence it was not a case of double jeopardy according to the strict and literal interpretation of Article 22. It means seizing a gold is just an action. It's not a prosecution, right? So he was not tried for his offence, and these are two different things, and that's why strict and literal interpretation of 22 subclause 2 allows his prosecution further. One more case law on literal rule, Nelson Motis versus Union of India. When the words of a statute are plain, clear and unambiguous, then they are reasonably susceptible to only one meaning. The court are bound to give effect to the meaning irrespective of the consequences. In Rohitash Kumar versus Om Prakash Sharma, the Honorable Supreme Court laid down that there may be a statute which causes great hardships and inconvenience. The court has no choice but to enforce it in full rigor. Hardships can't be used as a basis to alter the meaning of the language if such meaning is clear. It means if statute is clear and unambiguous or non-confusing, no need of further interpretation. Next rule of statutory interpretation is Golden Rule. It comes after the literal rule. It is known as the Golden Rule because it solves all the problems of interpretation. It provides that at first literal rule prevails. However, if the interpretation given through the literal rule leads to some kind or any kind of ambiguity, ambiguity means confusion, injustice, inconvenience, hardship, inequity, then in all such events the literal meaning shall be discarded and interpretation shall be done in such a manner that the purpose of the legislation is fulfilled. It means at first literal rule should be applied. But if applying the literal rule results in some kind of injustice or inequity or inconvenience, then judges should go beyond the dictionary meaning or beyond the literal meaning of the words, and they should give true meaning to the intention of the legislature. In Watburton versus Loveland, Burton Justice observed, I apprehend it is a rule in the construction of statutes that in the first instance, the grammatical sense of the words is to be adhered to. It means grammatical rule or literal rule must be applied at first. If that is contrary to or inconsistent with any expressed intention or declared purpose of the statute, or if it would involve any absurdity, repugnance, or inconsistency, the grammatical sense must then be modified, extended, or abridged so as to avoid such inconvenience but no further. It means if literal rule or application of literal rule leads to injustice or iniquity or any inconvenience, then in that case, golden rule must be applied. At times, while applying this means golden rule, the interpretation done may entirely be opposite to the literal rule, but it shall be justified because of the golden rule. The presumption here is that the legislature intends certain objects. An interpretation which goes against legislative object shall be rejected. It means why law is made? To give justice. If applying of literal rule is not giving the justice, then what is the use of law? Then in that case, golden rule must be applied. So what are the benefits of golden rule? Number one, it goes beyond the words and finds out legislative intent. Number two, it makes law alive. And number three, it gives importance to content or legislative intent and not just the legislative words. Some important case laws on golden rule. Purposefully, I covered Gopalan and Maneka's case. Same case law you can use on Article 21. Same case law, Gopalan's case law, you can use it in positivism, and Maneka Gandhi's case, you can use it in realism in jurisprudence. And same case laws you can use here. So in golden rule, you can apply Maneka Gandhi's case. The meaning and content of the words personal liberty again came up for the consideration of the Supreme Court. In this case, the petitioner's passport has been impounded by the central government under the Passport Act. It means passport of the petitioner, Maneka Gandhi, was taken away by the central government without giving her an opportunity to be heard. Here, the Supreme Court not only overruled A.K. Gopalan's case, but also widened the scope of words personal liberty. Bhagwati Justice in this case observed, the expression personal liberty in Article 21 is of the widest amplitude and it covers a variety of rights which go to constitute the personal liberty of man, and some of them have raised to the status of distinct fundamental rights and given additional protection under Article 19. In Gopalan's case, liberty was construed as physical liberty, but in Maneka Gandhi's case, that liberty was given a wider meaning, and it was provided that personal liberty goes beyond the physical liberty, and it is a wider definition of liberty which was provided in Maneka Gandhi's case. In next case law, State of Madhya Pradesh versus Azad Bharat Financial Company, a transporting company was carrying a parcel of apples was challenged and charge sheeted. The truck of the transporting company was impounded. Impounded means it was taken in the custody or confiscated, as the parcel, which was there in truck, contained opium along with the apples. Opium is banned, it's a drug. At the same time, the invoice shown for the transport consisted of apples only. It means on invoice it was shown as apples, but actually it contained apples and opium. Section 11 of the Opium Act 1878 provides all the vehicles which transport banned articles shall be impounded and articles shall be confiscated. It was confiscated by the transport company that they were unaware of the fact that opium was loaded along with the apples in the truck. So it means in this case the truck was also confiscated and the goods, that is opium and apples, they were confiscated. The court held that although the words contained in section 11 of the said act provided that the vehicle shall be confiscated, but by applying the literal rule of interpretation for this provision, it is leading to injustice and inequity, and therefore this interpretation shall be avoided. The word shall be confiscated should be interpreted as may be confiscated. It means in this case there is no need to confiscate the truck, but the goods must be confiscated. Next rule of statutory interpretation is mischief rule. Some laws are made to address specific mischief in society, like anti-sexual harassment law or law relating to polygamy. Why anti-sexual harassment law is made? because sexual harassment is a mischief which is there in the society, and to cure this mischief, law is made, right? Sexual harassment law. In such cases, if ambiguity arises, then the mischief which legislature wants to cure must be considered. So if there is any confusion, benefit of doubt must be given to victim, because this law is made to protect the victim. Because what mischief legislature wants to cover is ban sexual harassment or ban polygamy. So the interpretation which leads to polygamy must not be adhered to by the courts. So court must see which mischief legislature wants to cure, and in light of that mischief, that law must be interpreted. In case of mischief rule, Hayden's case is applied, or the rules which are provided in Hayden's case are applied. Mischief rule was originated in Hayden's case in 1584. It's a British case. It is a rule of purposive construction because the purpose of the statute is most important while applying the rule. So mischief rule is also called as purposive construction. Purposive means considering the purpose of legislature behind making a statute. It is also known as Hayden's rule because it was given by Lord Polk in Hayden's case in 1584. It is called as mischief rule because the focus is on curing the mischief. In the Hayden's case, it was held that there are four things which must be followed for true and sure interpretation. Number one, what was the common law before the making of an act? For example, child marriage law. So child law, there was no law relating to child marriage before the act. Second, what was the mischief for which the parent state statute was enacted? Child Marriage Act is enacted to ban child marriage. What remedy did the Parliament sought or had resolved and appointed to cure the disease of the Commonwealth? So over here, which remedy is provided? That after gaining majority, that child can avoid the contract of marriage, or the child can say that I don't want to go ahead with the marriage. The true reason of the remedy. Why this remedy is provided? Why all the child marriages are not banned? Because child marriages happen in society. Banning all the marriages which happened earlier is not going to serve the purpose of statute. And that's why instead of totally making it void, such marriages are made voidable. Okay, because the purpose of this rule is to surpass the mischief and advance the remedy. So purpose of law is to provide remedy and not to make all the marriages void. Okay, otherwise it will frustrate the purpose of the statute, and that's why every law relating to child marriage must be interpreted in the light of the mischief which legislature wants to cure. Coming to next case law, it is a little bit funny type of case law. Pyarelal versus Ramchandra. The accused in this case was prosecuted for selling the sweetened supari, which was sweetened with the help of artificial sweetener. He was prosecuted under the Food Adulteration Act. It was conducted by Pyarelal that supari is not a food item. The court held that the dictionary meaning is not always the correct meaning. Thereby, the mischief rule must be applicable and the interpretation which advances the remedy shall be taken into consideration. It means true that supari is not a day-to-day food object. But what is the purpose of Food Adulteration Act? To provide any type of food adulteration or mixing of chemicals in food. Okay, so though supari is not a food object, it is something which is consumed by people daily, and that's why going beyond the literal rule, mischief rule must be applied in this case. Next rule is about harmonious construction. It is there in the Constitution of India also. While knowing the relationship between fundamental rights and directive principle, this rule was applied. Okay, as per this rule, when two or more provisions of the same statute are contrary or repugnant to each other, if it goes against each other, then in such a situation, the court, if possible, will try to construe the provisions in such a manner as to give effect to both the provisions by maintaining harmony between the two. Okay, so though there are two provisions, but they are of the same act, and if purpose of the act is same, then provisions must be interpreted in such a way so as to give justice to the act. So those provisions must be harmoniously means peacefully constructed. The legislature clarifies its intention through the words used in the provision of the statute. So here, the basic principle of harmonious construction is that the legislature could not have tried to contradict itself. In the cases of interpretation of the Constitution, the rule of harmonious construction is applied many times. It means why the legislature will make a law, okay, in which two provisions are against each other. Legislature doesn't want to contradict its own law, and that's why they must be applied, or they must be interpreted harmoniously. It can be assumed that if the legislature has intended to give something by one, it would not intend to take it away with the other hand, as both the provisions have been framed by the legislature and absorbed the equal force of the law, right? Like fundamental rights and directive principles. Both are rights. Okay, so both must be interpreted in a way so that justice should be given to both. No one is superior to another one. So that is harmonious construction. In Ray Kerala Education Bill, harmonious construction can be defined as provision of fundamental rights and directive principle of state policy should be read harmoniously or hand in hand. If any conflict occurs, then court can refer to any law or interpret any law to give effect to both as far as possible. In Keshwanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, Parliament can amend the constitution without disturbing basic structure. It means basic structure is there which goes along with the spirit of the constitution. So while applying or while amending the constitution, it should be amended in such a way so as it should not be harm basic structure. It should be harmoniously amended without hurting the basic structure. So these two case laws can be provided on harmonious construction. In next case law, MSM Sharma versus Krishna Sinha, facts of the case, Article 19(1)(a), which deals with freedom of speech and expression of the Constitution, provides for freedom of speech and expression. Article 194(3) provides to the Parliament for punishing for its contempt, and it is known as the parliamentary privilege. In this case, an editor of a newspaper published the word for word record of the proceedings of the Parliament, including those portions which were expuned from the record, which means which were taken away from the record. Means what he did, he was there in the parliamentary proceedings and he published everything relating to parliamentary proceedings, and the part which was not published by Parliament was also published by him. He contended that he had a fundamental right to speech and expression. It was held by the court that Article 19(1)(a) itself talks about reasonable freedom. So he has a freedom to speak and write anything, but it is a reasonable freedom, right? Therefore, freedom of speech and expression shall pertain only to reasonable freedom. He is not allowed to publish parliamentary proceedings which are expuned or which are banned by the Parliament itself. Next important maxim or rule which is applied while interpreting a statute is nocitur associis. Nocitur associis and ejusdem generis both are related. In Latin, ejusdem generis means of the same kind and nocitur means recognized by its partners. Ejusdem generis is used for interpreting loosely written statutes, okay? And nocitur associis is used for interpreting questionable words in statutes, both used by the courts to interpret a legislation. In nocitur associis, words in statute must be interpreted in association with the other words or phrases used in the text. Legislative intent must be ascertained by considering or reading the statute as a whole. Words, clauses and phrases used in statute should not be studied by detaching or isolating, but the whole and every part of the statute must be considered in fixing the meaning of its part. For example, public interest litigation is nowhere provided in the Constitution. Still, it is allowed by judiciary. Why? Because it goes along with the spirit of the Constitution. What is the spirit of Constitution? Providing social justice. So, nocitur associis is applied and PILs are allowed under the Constitution of India. Some case laws. Under the doctrine of nocitur associis, in the interpretation of statute, the meaning of a doubtful word may be ascertained by reference to the meaning of words associated with it. It was provided in State of Bombay versus Hospital Mazdoor Sabha. The doctrine of nocitur associis was applied in Rohit Pulp and Papers Mill Limited versus Collector of Central Excise. The court was considering the scope of the term printing and writing paper and coated paper. Since the relevant words were construed in the context of notification, granted concession to small scale factories which manufacture paper with unconventional raw materials. The Supreme Court found no reason to restrict scope of the concession. So they provided concession to Rohit Pulp and Paper Mills Limited. They use like writing paper and coated paper, and the concession which is available for such industries was given to them. One more example, essential commodities. Okay, so what are the essential commodities will be decided by the judiciary. Okay, so in every area essential commodities change. So by using the words nocitor or sources, essential commodities can be interpreted in an area. Ejusdem generis means of the same kind. The rule requires that where in a statute there are general words following particular and specific words, the general words must be confined to things of the same kind as those specifically mentioned. The Punjab and Haryana High Court held in Balwant Singh and others versus State of Haryana, from the language of section 364A Indian Penal Code, it becomes crystal clear that this section is applicable only when the kidnapping for ransom, etc. is done in order to compel the government or any foreign state or international intergovernmental organization to do or abstain from doing any act. When an individual person has been compelled to pay the ransom amount, the offence under section 364A is not made out at all. It means there is a difference between normal kidnapping and kidnapping under 364A IPC. Right? Under 364A IPC, a technique to pressurize the government is done. So these are different, and ejusdem generis cannot be applied in this case. Principle or doctrine of ejusdem generis is usually applied in cases coming under Article 12 while constructing the definition of state. Article 12 in the Constitution was under consideration in University of Madras versus Chantabai. The Madras High Court evolved the principle of ejusdem generis, that is of the like nature. It means that those authorities are covered under the expression other authorities which perform governmental or sovereign functions. So authorities which perform governmental functions all come within the definition of state by applying the principle of ejusdem generis. In Rajasthan State Electricity Board versus Mohanlal, it was held that to be a state, it is not necessary that authority must be performing governmental or sovereign functions. It should be created by the Constitution of India, have power to make laws, and performance of function very close to governmental or sovereign function. So by applying ejusdem generis, if these functions are performed by the authority, that authority is called as a state. That's it for the day. I know this lecture was little difficult. Try to hear it for more than like 2-3 times so that you will remember it. I'm planning to make a revision lecture on interpretation of statute, and I will make a third lecture on interpretation covering all the remaining important chapters, and I'll try to give a very quick lecture also for easier understanding. So stay tuned till my next lecture. Goodbye and good luck.